Hello and welcome to another episode of Fan-Made Cards. This is the video series where I react to a few fan-made cards I found on the internet. And last episode I went over 8 corps made by Genemai, and those were only the first half of a set that he made. And I promised I would go over the second half this episode, but I don't have time for that today because talking about corps always takes quite long. So I will do that next episode, and this episode we will be going over 8 project cards, and they were made by a set of different creators. The first two that we are going to talk about now were made by Turczi, who was already featured in this series quite a few times, and he always makes quite creative cards. And this first one is Trojan Asteroid Bases. And it's basically another spin on a Jovian multiplier. We had this quite a few times, and I think already quite a few times by Turczi. He seems to like his Jovian multipliers. And this one is really interesting. It costs 18, has the Jovian tag and the space tag, of course. It gives a point for each Jovian tag. That's why we call it a Jovian multiplier. It grants a trade fleet, which is insanely strong. Having the ability to trade twice, at least, is insane. Like, if you get to 6 power prod and 2 trade fleets, each time you're the first player in a gen, you can trade to the 2 best colonies for the best effect instead of just the single best colony. And that's just an insane bonus. And then it has a requirement which kind of balances this card. So let's talk about the trade fleet a little bit more first. I think in the base game there are only 3 other cards that grant you a trade fleet, if I'm correct. I think there's Skydogs, or not in the base game, in the Colonies expansion. I think there's Skydogs, there's Spaceport, and then there's Spaceport Colony. Let me just check that because I'm not quite sure. So Spaceport Colony grants you a trade fleet, Spaceport grants you a trade fleet, and Skydogs grants you a trade fleet. And all of these cards I would consider top tier. Spaceport may be the least of them because it's quite expensive for a city. But as I said, getting another trade fleet is insane. And there are actually like a lot of people that are playing with the house rule that you cannot trade twice in a turn. So you can do 2 actions in a turn, but only one of them can be trading to not let the player with 2 trade fleets snowball out of control. So getting a trade fleet is insane. Then the Jovian multiplier with the text up here for 18 is already great. Like Ganymede Colony costs 20, and that one just places a city in addition to being a Jovian multiplier, and the city is basically an afterthought. The only relevant thing you can do with that is like being Tharsis or for mayor or something like that. So basically the base cost of a Jovian multiplier is a little bit less than 20. And this one costs a little bit less than 20, but also grants you a trade fleet. So the requirement up here needs to be really, really strict, and it is. 3 asteroids is really hard to get. Like, there are so few cards in the game with asteroids. Like, they were only really introduced with a few promo cards and then a few select cards in the other expansions. There's like maybe, I don't know the correct number because it's really hard to filter for them and on the online Terraforming Mars card list, but there's like 10 of them. So getting one and then also accumulating 3 asteroids, because a lot of them want the asteroids to be used, is quite hard. But there are corps or preludes, or like with Prelude 2, also preludes, and then also some cards with which you could get these 3 asteroids quite quickly. Like if you play Astrodrill, I think you start with 3 asteroid, right? Astrodrill is not a great corp. Yeah, that one starts with 3 asteroids. Then you could immediately play Trojan asteroid bases. The thing is, you don't want to play it super early on because you won't need the trade fleet super early on, because you won't have 6 power prod. Also, being a Jovian multiplier, that disincentivizes you from playing it early on because you don't want to reveal that you have a Jovian multiplier. So that's another way that this card is a little bit more balanced. But the thing is, if you get this in the mid game, it's already clear that you're going for Jovians, so you're not fooling anyone anymore. And you have asteroids down, then this card is insane in value, like really, really crazy. But I still like it because the requirement is so difficult to reach. So it's an interesting card. It's like in the expansions, going for space and science is strong, but going for Jovians can often feel like a trap because there are, even with all expansions, only 4 Jovian multipliers, and you just won't find them in the huge deck. So adding a few more and making them strong, I think, is not such a problem if you're playing with all expansions. But because this requires colonies, I think it's okay. The next one, I don't think we need to talk about that much. It's also made by David Turczi. As I said, the first 2 are made by David Turczi. This one is called Urban Heat Islands. It requires that you have 4 cities. It costs 10 MC and then it grants you 2 temperature steps. 2 temperature steps for 10 MC is insane. But it's not really that insane. Like, let's compare it to Lava Flows, which grants 2 for 18, but that one grants you a tile as well. Of course, like on Tharsis, having to place the tile on a what's it called? On a volcanic area is often not that great because the bonuses there are not that strong. You won't get a lot of ocean rebates. You often cannot place it in between opponents' cities and so on. But on cards like Hellas, you can freely place Lava Flows and on Elysium there are insane placement bonuses that you can get with that you can get on the volcanic areas. So Lava Flows is like only a little bit more expensive. Like, for example, on Elysium, if you pick up 2 titanium, then Lava Flows effectively is only 2 MC more expensive than Urban Heat Islands. And Urban Heat Islands has a really steep requirement. Having 4 cities on Mars is insanely hard to reach. Like, you will not get this in the early game. In the mid game, only if you're going for cities really hard with someone like Tharsis or Mining Guild. And yeah, in the late game, it's possible to reach 4 cities, but 2 temperature bumps for 10 MC, as I just elaborated with Lava Flows, is not such an insane bonus that it really justifies the steep requirement. So I think this card, if you can play it, it's okay. It's a good card, but the requirement makes it on average not that strong. Next up, we have a card made by GerotixYT. I think I covered a few of his cards in this series already, and this one is really, really cool. I like the picture and I like the whole design of the card. I think it's well made. It's called Biofuel Factory. It costs 14 MC, has a plant tech and a power tech. We need good power cards that do something that is not granting power prot, although this one grants power prot, but in a creative way. It grants 1 power prot for every plant tech that you have, and it also grants a point. So first of all, I like that this is not a building tech. Probably would make sense, given that it's a factory that you're building on Mars. But there's already so many power prot cards with building techs as well that it's just kind of tiresome. And the thing here is, it grants power prot based on how many plant techs you have. Plant techs are really hard to play in the early game. And if you can play them in the early game, they are often not that great. Something like Adapted Lichen or Lichen is not that great. Like, it's an okay card to play if you know you're going for a ground game or if you need the tag, which can often happen. But you won't play an insane amount of them. And then in the mid game, you might have like 3 or 4 down. But 14 for 3 power prot and a point, it's okay value, especially if you need another plant tag. Like, if you have insects, you're already going for plant tags. Then Biofuel Factory is a really good card because it grants another plant tag. You profit off of the plant tags that you already have. And yeah, it just combos well with insects. But if you're not actively collecting plant tags already, I don't think Biofuel Factory is a reason to collect them like insects is or NRA is. It combos nicely with the green combo, but it's not like the strongest enabler or combo piece that you can get. But it's a really cool idea. I like it. I think lore-wise and concept-wise it makes sense. You could make it even stronger by giving it as a building tag as well. And then I think the 3 tags in combination would make sense. But yeah, I think it's a cool card, cool concept. Next up, we have a really interesting card. This one was made by AudunAG. I don't think I've ever covered a card made by him or her. This is called Solarian. It costs 60 MC, so would, with quite a bit of distance, be the most expensive card in the deck. It has a requirement of 6 science tags, grants a science tag and a space tag itself, grants 5 flat points, also the highest amount of flat points in the game, draws you 10 cards, which is bonkers, and grants 3 TR. Basically, the idea behind this card is that it's super expensive and it needs a lot of science, but you're basically just building a planet. If you're building a planet, I think this is a little bit too cheap. But interesting concept nonetheless. Is it balanced though? So 10 cards. You could say a card is worth 3 MC, but I would rather say it's worth 2.5 MC because you don't know what you're drawing. Like buying a card that you know in the draft costs 3 MC, but you don't know what you're drawing. So I would say 2.5. So this is already worth 25 MC. Then a TR is like Release of Inert Gases is 14 plus 3, that's 17. 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. Let's say 8. So this is also worth 24 MC. And then a point is worth 5 MC. So this is 25 MC. So 50 plus 24, that's 74. Costs 60. Expensive cards should yield a discount because playing them is harder. So you should get a discount on playing them. This costs 63 and the value is 74. Of course, you also need to factor in the science requirement. And you also need to factor in that you get at least 1 really useful tag and then quite a useful tag because this means you can pay for this with titanium. The problem with this is it's so expensive and it has a steep requirement that the 10 cards that you get that make up roughly a third of the value of the card are not that useful anymore. Like if you play this in the last gen, you don't need 10 cards. Like sure, you can just sell them and that just makes this card cost 50 instead of 60. And then this is roughly 50. Then it's an okay point dump, especially if you have a lot of titanium. But optimally, you want to play this in a mid game. The problem is games that you can play this in a mid game, you're already winning because that means you're insanely rich in the mid game, possibly having a lot of titanium or like quite a bit of titanium and then playing with turmoil and having unity and power or playing Phobolock or whatever, and also having a lot of science tags. So you're rich and you have a lot of science tags. Most of the time that means that you're winning already. And then playing a card that scores well and draws you 10 new cards is just bonkers. Like you definitely, like if you see your opponent setting up an engine strat with titanium and card draw and science, you need to deny him this card. But it's super useless if you're not going for science, obviously, and if you're not going for a super strong engine, especially if you don't have titanium prot. This doesn't make sense. Like playing this for straight MC will just bankrupt you. I think the good thing here is if you're playing engine without card draw, but a lot of titanium prot, you're often screwed. Like, you're often really, really screwed. Let's say you're Phobolock and you start with asteroid mining. Play that Gen 1, but you don't have any card draw. You don't draw any more space tags, any more Jovian tags. You're just screwed with that corp because you're poor except for the titanium. But you can't do anything with it because you're not drawing any more space tags. Then drawing into Solarian would be the best case scenario if you have the science tags. Because it grants you more cards, so more chance to draw space tags, and you can just dump your titanium on this and score a lot of points. But yeah, having these 6 science tags often means that you already have card draw, because science tags often give card draw. So I don't think I like this card very much. I don't think a card that costs 60 and has such strong effects should be in the game. And I think lore-wise, it also doesn't make that much sense having a card that costs 60 build a whole freaking planet. Don't think it makes that much sense. The concept is interesting, but I don't like it that much. And then lastly, we have a set of cards made by Beethoven OP69. Nice name. It's 4 cards that are all either quite strong or quite broken. And this first one, Overachiever, is actually quite broken. Costs 2 MC, has no tag. And the action is that you get to take 4 actions in this turn. I don't know if this means that you basically do 5 actions because the first action is doing 4 actions, or if you just take an action and then it extends your actions this turn to 4, meaning that you have 3 more after taking this action. Either way, it means that you have more actions than you should have, and that is not healthy for the game, I think, because a lot of situations in Terraforming Mars are based around the fact that everyone has 2 actions each turn. So fighting for milestones, fighting for bonus bumps, all that stuff is like a delicate dance between players often, and a race at the same time. Who can get these actions off most efficiently to get either the milestone or the bonus bump or like the greenery conversion or whatever. Like if you have 4 heat bumps, like if you have like 32 heat laying around and we're at -8 degrees Celsius, you cannot do them all in one go to get the bonus ocean. With Overachiever, if it works the first way, like you just get 5 actions, then you can do that, and that's just broken because it's just straight up unfair to your opponent because there's no counterplay. And then the thing is that in a lot of other situations, this is just useless. But the fact that it's so cheap means that it's almost always a no-brainer and definitely needs to be cut. And this would definitely land in S tier, therefore. Also, no requirements. I don't think this is healthy for the game. Let's just state it like that. But next up, we have Mass Church. This costs 12 MC. Has a building tag. It requires you to have no science checks, something we never had. And then it's kind of similar to Martian Zoo because it gives you an action for that grants MC for each resource on here. But instead of getting the resources passively, you get them actively. So each time you activate this card, you get a resource, and then afterwards you get 1 MC for each resource. So both in one. So I've seen some people complain on Reddit. By the way, all of these cards I found on Reddit, and I have linked all of the posts in the description, so definitely check them out if you found the cards interesting. I've seen some people complain that this basically means that people that go to church can't do science. I mean, it's a bit implied here, but I think it's a bit funny as well. And yeah, I wouldn't take offense, but I'm also not going to church, so whatever. I think this card, if you get this Gen 1, is really, really strong because it gets stronger every gen and it's just good cash out. So basically in Gen 1, it would pay out 1 MC, in Gen 2, it would pay out 2 MC, in Gen 3, it would pay out 3 MC. Can we calculate this quickly? So 10 gen game. 1, 2, let's let Excel do the work. In 10 gens, I'm really just too lazy to do any math. Okay, Excel just doesn't want to, seems like. All right, well, we won't do the math then. Basically, what I wanted to say is it's quite strong. Like in Gen 10, you're already getting 10 MC out of this per gen. and it gets stronger every gen. Still, like with each production card in the game, there's a point where it isn't worth it anymore. It's also quite back-ended. Like a card like Acquired Company will give you the same payout from the start until the end of the game, but this one will get stronger every gen, meaning that most of the payout is at the end of the game, making it even more of a gamble if you're already in the mid-game. But the payout is just higher than with, for example, Acquired Company, much higher. And therefore, it's really, really strong. The problem here with the requirement is that this requirement doesn't prevent you from playing this early, like Martian Zoo does. Martian Zoo requires 2 cities on Mars, I think, meaning that you often cannot play it in Gen 1. But Mars Church is more like a max requirement, and therefore you have to play it early. But early is already a time when you want to play it. Like max requirements or requirements in general should be the other way around. They should prevent you from playing it in this situation where you would like to play them the most. Like in the late game, when you most certainly have at least 1 science tech, you wouldn't want to play Mars Church anyways. So yeah, probably I would switch this, like switching it around wouldn't make sense because just lore-wise wouldn't make sense. Just removing it wouldn't make sense. We could make it a little bit weaker by just increasing the price. That's maybe one way to go about it. But next up, we have Mathematician. And this one is pretty broken. So it costs 1 MC. It requires at least 1 city tile on play, no matter who owns it. It grants 2 science tags. So 2 science tags, that's the main reason why you want to play research. And this just costs 1 MC and grants you that. Then you get an action that lowers your MC prod by 1, and then you add 1 student research on this card, and each student counts as a science tag. This is broken. It makes it way too easy to play the high science requirement cards like Mass Converter, AI Central, AGT, Quantum Extractor, Warp Drive, and so on. So Mathematician, it's just broken. It's way too easy. You can, like, if a city is placed Gen 1, you can play Mathematician, use it once, you immediately have 3 science tags and can play AI Central. It's just insane. One way to balance this would be remove the 2 science tags up here. And also, I would say, make it so that you have to use up the student resources. Maybe that would be too weak. Then we could do it that either it costs nothing to add student resources on here, but I like the gamble, or like the payoff, not the payoff, the trade-off between lowering your MC prod and getting science tags. What you could do would be no science tags up here. You pay 1 MC prod, get a student resource. Each student resource counts as 2 science tags, but gets used up. So when you play a card that requires science tags, you take the student resources off of Mathematician, out of play, and each of them counts as 2 science tags. That would still mean that it's quite easy to get to high science tag requirement cards. But like if you want to play AI Central first, you would need to use this twice, lowering your MC prod by two steps. Then you use up the resources, and then getting to Quantum Extractor, you need to use this twice again. And then to AGT and so on. You know what I mean. It just makes it way more expensive to use it, and also more interactive because you use the student resources, and also it couldn't get out of hand that fast, because this one can definitely get out of hand. It's definitely too strong. And lastly, we have Alchemist. Cost 7, requires a science tag, and it says you can use steel as titanium and titanium as steel. The question here is does the steel have the worth? Like, is steel still worth 2? Like, if I use steel as titanium, is each steel resource worth 3 MC or 2 MC? If each steel resource is worth 3 MC, so when I use steel as titanium, then that is a really good trade-off. But that would then also mean that each titanium used as steel is worth 2 MC, which is a bad trade-off. But at the same time, the whole effect is still increasing your flexibility by quite a lot, because the trade-off of playing mineral prot cards is that if you don't have any card draw, you run the risk, even if you have some card draw, you run the risk of not getting enough cards to pay for with your minerals. And Alchemist just alleviates this problem, makes you super flexible, and just reduces the risk of playing mineral production cards. And I think this is quite strong. I think it should have a little bit of a higher requirement, such that you can't play it in this super early game. So you need to play it later on, meaning that if you don't have a target for your steel and titanium, they sit around longer, unused, making this card just weaker in general. But I like the concept, and I like if it's the case that steel, when used as titanium, is worth 3 MC, and titanium when used as steel is worth 2 MC. I like the fact that the resources change in value. I think that's quite interesting. And yeah, so I would probably leave the cost as is, because 7 MC is it's a nice price for such a card with just an effect, no point as well, and then make the requirement a bit higher. Maybe make it a 3 science tech requirement, something like that. Or another cool idea would be it requires a science tech, and it basically counts as a negative science tech, because alchemy is it's not a real science, right? They did it in the Middle Ages, tried to convert stuff to gold, and it wasn't science. And then having an alchemist reduce your science level by 1 tech, basically, could also be a way of balancing this card, because losing a science tech is definitely hurts. And just the requirement to have a science tech makes sure that you have a science tech that you can lose. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. I think it needs a little bit of a nerf to be okay. But yeah, I like the card. But yeah, that was it. I just noticed that the episode wasn't considerably shorter than usual. But yeah, I still hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Again, I linked all of the posts in the description, so check them out if you enjoyed the cards. And while you're down there, please leave a comment as well for the algorithm. I would really appreciate that. And yeah, I hope I see you in the next episode. Have a good one, guys, and goodbye.